This is Growth Guide, a podcast exploring the depths of curiosity, questioning everything in the name of growth. I'm your host, Brian D'Alessandro. Nathaniel Whitmore is an herbalist, mycologist, and Shiatsu-shi specialist. His knowledge and bag of tricks go deep, pulling from many modalities that he's been schooled on along the way. Today, we'll talk about some of his teachers like spiritual moonshine man Taterbug Tyler and Michio Kushi, who helped bring the macrobiotic diet to the U.S. Born and raised around the border of upstate New York and Pennsylvania, his family has been there so long that his street name bears his name. Happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Have touched a lot of different modalities and practices, so I'd love to get into some of those today. I know you've practiced in herbology and in different martial arts, spiritual practices. So what initially attracted you down this path?
It's kind of a difficult question to pinpoint an answer to. I attribute my kind of alternative path to an early interest in dreams. And that led me to explore concepts behind dreams, which oftentimes people more or less just ignore their dreams. But I became interested in lucid dreaming and had different experiences through dreams. And
how old were you when this started?
Well, actually, one thing I recall is I used to watch my alarm clock as I was falling asleep because I was interested in remembering what time I fell asleep. But in the morning, I would, of course, forget what time it was that I fell asleep. But I always had this interest in the process of falling asleep. From looking at my alarm clock, I soon realized that I always woke up about 5 minutes before when I set my alarm, no matter what time it was. And actually, since that point, I haven't really ever used an alarm clock. And I started to recall dreams in the morning. And I can remember lying in bed as a child and being torn between this excitement of the day that was growing and this deep relaxation of being in bed, but also being in that kind of drifty dream world. And of course, these days, especially recently as an adult and feeling busy, I just wake up and pop out of bed and start thinking about all the things that I have to do or want to do, and or whatever demands are in front of me. But I think having that time as a child, which is one thing I feel children are being robbed of today, is that kind of wide open space time in the in-between stage.
Yeah, where imagination really flourishes and you could just daydream, right? And I remember when we were growing up, daydreaming was, it was given such a negative connotation.
Yeah, like just staring off into space. But really, like, I can recall looking at the wood grain patterns and things, and the imagination comes out during those times.
Yeah, I would get big into that too. I remember reading that Leonardo da Vinci used to do that when he was in the bathroom. The doors were, like wood panel, and he would just start seeing in the grains these big battles with these horses, and some of these really famous sketches by him were done with him on the pan.
Daydreams. Right. Yeah, that really makes sense to me. So as a teenager, I started to explore those things.
So you, through your self-guided exploration, learned that you had the ability to impact your dreams and influence and remember?
Yes, especially recall was something that came very naturally to me. And I started to realize that the more I focused on a dream, the more my memory would give me of details and other dreams. And But one reason I think back to dreaming is also that my father had run into a guy who was locally pretty well known, named Taterbug. Taterbug was I think he was a variety of characters, and but he was a Tyler, which was one of the first families in the area, and just really well connected.
And what area is that?
Well, Tyler Hill is just across the river into Pennsylvania.
And so yeah, we're upstate right now, or not really upstate, but we're in Callicoon, which is about 10 minutes from the Pennsylvania border.
Yeah, so he's down by the Skinner's Falls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, little bit downriver there. And what happened is, I guess my father was telling him of my interest in lucid dreaming and these kind of strange. I always had an interest in Native American culture too, and I had gotten into reading the Carlos Castaneda books, and which I found at the Callicoon Library.
Wow.
I ended up finding piles and piles of them in the library basement, which that's a really special place for me too. A lot of important messages have come through old library book sales and basements.
That's another thing I think about with our kids and the younger generations. I mean, how many hours did you spend as a kid, whether it was willfully or because you had an assignment, in the library just searching around? And there's such a unique experience to that and how you explore information. It's very different than how we explore it on the web. And the web is obviously incredible in that it gives us access to everything. But this almost scavenger hunt of going into a library trying to find something. There's codes with the Dewey Decimal System to get the card catalogs, and I mean it was just a very tactile and experiential.
There's something that can be very alive about that physical book, and especially old books. They seem to. I know another experience I had at the Callicoon Library was just a book kind of popping out to me as I went up to the one shelf at the end of the aisle, and I didn't really understand. I was pretty young. The title was something like Karma and Christianity, and it was a red covered book. And I started looking at it. I don't think at that point I had encountered the idea of reincarnation, like as something that someone told me or that I read about. It was even more rural in Callicoon when I was a kid. But somehow that I decided to pick that book up and start reading, and I saw a lot of truth to it, but it was almost like I don't know why, I don't know what happened there, but somehow that
Isn't it
book
funny?
just
There's
called to me.
things that just call to us, and it's beyond reason or labeling why it happens. But when I look back in hindsight, there's a lot of those moments that something just grabs hold. And I mean, I think that's one thing I've learned as I got older is when that happens, go down the rabbit hole. It's going to be an adventure.
Right.
Okay, so back to Taterbug, which, I mean, that name right there. And you've spoken of him in the past when we were talking. So can you just kind of paint a picture of him as a character?
Yeah, Taterbug, he was a character. He was overweight. He was a pretty round-shaped guy, which is one reason he got the name Taterbug. Went back from being a baby in the garden, like a fat potato beetle. But he had his plaid shirt on, and he always walked with a garden hoe, like a triangular shaped garden hoe, but he cut it down so it wasn't the full size. It was more like a little hook, and he would use that when we were going hunting for ginseng and things like that, or if he was into hunting for arrowheads. So if he's walking through the cornfields in the springtime, he would flip around in the dirt. Or he claimed it saved his life too one time when he slipped in the woods, and he was able to reach out and grab onto a tree root instead of tumbling over the rock ledge. And he always wore a hat. I don't know what kind of hat it is really, but he was a bluegrass musician, and he made moonshine. and he was kind of well known for that. And he's the one that taught me about maple syrup too. So I always think of him in the springtime when we start making maple syrup. I still cook with his pan, his maple sap pan.
Oh, wow.
And we spent a lot of time he had a little kind of teepee, and then he had a sugar shack that he had made in the woods. And, he would, it kind of just fit right in there, cooking on the wood fire back in the woods. And then, the reason dreams led me to him is because he did what he considered a shamanic meditation that he called flying. So he said you can fly inside your body or outside your body, and there was basically two ways to fly, and one was dreaming. And then the other was a meditation that he was practicing. And basically you get into a trance so that you're in that state. He was an herbalist. So to him, that was about healing. He's also the one that first told me about auras. So he could perceive, visually, he could perceive auras, but what was an easier thing to show me about was the feeling of the aura, like when he showed me with the hand. I think certain people are called to healing, but I think part of the idea with the healing power that we have is everybody really has it, but sometimes we're not shown or don't open up to it somehow. But he was big on palm healing, which with the reading and things that I did, it was very new to me, and I was blown away because I started practicing this technique with the hands. We kind of build up the magnetism,
like a qigong practice.
Yeah, and then you get the feel for it. And when I first got that sense, I was really blown away. And I said, how come no one showed me this? It's so simple. And I started, showing everybody that was open to talking about it. And I found some people just had a similar experience. They're just, oh wow, that's amazing. And some people that didn't tune into it so easily, but
yeah, and I think there's a couple of things that I've observed that goes on there, right? I mean, some people seem to experience these things with different senses, like you are speaking about how you would feel it, and then other people I know will visualize it, and they could all of a sudden start seeing colors expanding and contracting and changing. And so there's that element where sometimes we perceive things differently. The other one is, as you said, the question of why we don't all know about this. Well, I think sometimes it's that we just haven't been exposed to it, but other times on the flip side, we're taught, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, that it's not possible. And once we hear that, it's very easy to develop this self-limiting belief around it. So I love that, you were exploring it and sharing it with others, and people were tapping in, because I think that's how these things spread, it seems.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've been a little surprised since that time to realize how precious of an exposure that was. It's even with yoga and qigong and these things being so popular, that element is not as much present as I might have thought it would be. And thinking back, maybe if I wasn't shown that as an impressionable teenager, then I could have easily made it through those years and then kind of solidified as an adult, and then not been open to those kinds of notions. I think often when people are, even if intellectually people are open to it, it's still, we learn certain patterns, kind of like hypnotism. I'm thinking of this talk I went to where the lady kind of surprised us with saying she was going to show hypnosis with the whole group. So all of a sudden she's doing a talk, and then she walked over and turned down the light, and she asked us to close our eyes, and she did a walk around the room. And by the time she was in the front, I was in a full-blown trance. And I had never been hypnotized in that intentional way like that before. So all of a sudden I'm just kind of floating in this state. And then she calls us back, and I'm looking around the room, and as everyone's coming back, she says, "What were your experiences?" And to me, it seemed like everybody was affected somehow. They had all looked like they were rolling out of bed kind of in the morning, like, but then some people said, "No, I didn't feel anything." And I thought, oh, that's interesting. We all had this kind of shared experience, but it wasn't the same. And they say some people can't be hypnotized, some people can, and it depends on the mind. And then in the same way, we all experience things different, and we might take away something like, oh, this is even something like temperature, hot or cold, but depending on where you're coming from, it's all different.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, so you connect with Taterbug. He introduced you to aura, and energy. Where does it go from there?
Well, he was always trying to encourage me to practice massage, and I was developing an interest in the herbs. For me, it wasn't even so much about the healing. I was more interested still in the mind adventure part. I was interested in the potential of entering into a shamanic trance and just exploring the mind. I was less practical as a teenager because teenagers have less concerns about real life, so to speak. So I was excited about this energy, but the importance of healing, I guess that's another kind of related but different thread that we take health for granted when we're young, but then as we get older, we start to value it more. Like the idea that youth is wasted on the young. So why do I care about massage? My neck, I had already hurt my back, I guess, when I was young, but it wasn't until I attended the Kushi Institute for a program that was just a comprehensive program. So it included Shiatsu, which is acupressure, as part of the program. And so I went into that without any really desire to learn, but because it was part of the program. And then I started to think back. I said, oh, so Taterbug was, I see why this is important now. After I was forced to work with the body, then okay, now I understand where he was going with that. And he seemed to work with the meridians a little bit, which is what is the system in Shiatsu, because sometimes he would go down the head with his hands, like following these lines of energy. He never said meridians, but then when I learned the more about the channels, the meridians, then I realized, oh, the bladder channel and the gallbladder channels are there. So I don't know how he came to that, but I later realized that he was, kind of following those channels.
And, he could have been taught. He could have also just had the gift of seeing. One of the things that fascinated me around energy in the body is that ancient civilizations on all corners of the world have discovered and mapped this out, and they're almost always, exactly the same. The way that they digest it and to, put it on paper and use it as a practice is one thing, but the notion that they were all seeing these, as I've heard it called, flowing rivers of energy through the body, is, incredible. And I think for me, it's pretty convincing that, like, while we can't measure this in quantifiable terms the same way we can the physical body, that's pretty solid, proof that it exists, whether we can understand it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a verification all over the place, even though collectively we don't have the way to put it down on paper quite the same as we do with physical
And
anatomy.
that's always the challenge with the subtle arts, right? I mean, these are
Mm-hmm.
not as tangible. They're experiential and energetic, and so
Hmm.
you witness and experience something happening, but you
Mm-hmm.
try to then go put it into words, and it's so nonverbal in the experience that it just seems to water
Hmm.
it down.
Right. But I guess that's the way it has to be if you're at the cutting edge,
Hmm.
the where things are creative and developing
Yeah, and
and
that's the time
yeah.
that we're living in. I'm so excited about because we have the quantum realm that is
Hmm.
really coming to the forefront, and science and um, energy or spirituality even are starting to intersect in a really interesting way.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you practiced some shiatsu massage and started to recognize the value of that. Where did you go from there?
I basically combined the shiatsu with the herbal path, and I one thing I discovered through that is that they really come from the same place. So I feel like for me personally, these different pieces along the way were put there so that they could kind of come together. And I guess that's what we all go through, right? So there's an integration process that's happening inside, but then I realized, oh, this is it's the same system. Like you said, that when you look at all these different cultures and traditions, they discover the same thing about the energy pathways and all that. So um, to me, I feel like I'm a little different than I mean, I guess in a lot of ways, but uh, relating to the way people approach herbs, I noticed that generally today there's the interest in putting things into a modern language. So when we try to learn about herbs, we try to explain that in the light of our modern theory of anatomy, physiology, chemical constituents. That's something that happened in, I think, the time that I've been studying herbs. The idea of the energetics has entered more into the mainstream. Where a little bit ago, in the modern age, people were trying to take traditional knowledge and rework it into a an explanation based on their own language, on our own language. But I consider myself a traditionalist, and my interest is not really as much in understanding the chemistry because I'm not a chemist. I'm not. I gave up on that path. You can only do so much. So I don't want to be the chemist and the herbalist. I want to be the shiatsu practitioner and the herbalist. That's what came to me, and to me that's one in the same system. And when you go back to the ancient roots, that's really what it comes from. So shiatsu also teaches diagnosis. It's not just a treatment, and that's why
Hmm.
at the Kushi Institute that was really why we took it, because it wasn't so much they were training us to be shiatsu practitioners, but Michio Kushi, he would often people complained about having to learn shiatsu. They thought it was too much and too challenging, and it wasn't what they went there for. So they would complain, and we get back to Michio, the head guy. He said, "No, you have to learn this because it's important. It's part of the whole system. That's why we're doing this." And that's the truth. Yeah. So by um, feeling the body, or even looking visually, if you have some knowledge of the channels, if there's a rash or a pain or anything going on that's under visual inspection, you're going to also consider which channel this is, or you might look at how it's presenting in the body. So traditionally, the diagnostic system that would lead you to use herbs is coming from the same system that developed Shiatsu. It's not a head-based system like our modern theory is. Traditional medicine focuses on touch in many ways. Even acupuncture today, the primary diagnostic method, I think it could be said, is pulse assessment. Because when you're touching the pulse, that heartbeat is in some ways that's the mark of life, right? So with the babies in there in utero, you're listening for the heartbeat, and then someone is collapsed on the floor, you're going to listen. Is the heart still beating? Because that's your heart's beating the whole time you're alive.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? We only seem to test that in times of peril or concern. We don't use it as available as a check-in, right?
Yeah, but in traditional Chinese medicine, basically when you're reading the pulse, that's the flow of life. That's the flow of blood, right? Because the qi and the blood are moving together, but the blood is connecting the whole body together. So there's a language there that's played out. And these days, even very advanced and able pulse diagnosticians of the modern world are often trying to say this isn't even reading qi. They're saying this is, and they have elaborate explanations of how these things can be read in the pulse. It's very interesting. And I think a lot of that's coming from high-level science that I don't understand. So it's not really my place to be too critical of that. But my point is that to me, and a lot of my teachers have stressed the importance of energy. And to me, that's really what we're talking about. And these diagnostic methods are important because you want to assess the condition through assessing the energy, right? That's what Chinese medicine is. That's where Shiatsu comes from. When theories are reduced in Chinese medicine, one of the basic theories is that this energy is there and that we have to understand how the patterns that are unfolding and how that plays out, and then how to work with it. And to me, that's the tradition. And then when you're studying a tradition, you are tapping into that whole tradition. There's like a language there. This is like the quantum ocean idea, right? So
you said quantum ocean?
Quantum ocean. So
I don't think I've heard of this.
At one point, I had run into a man named Ellis Peterson. He passed away quite a few years ago, and we got talking a lot. And he was a mathematician by trade, and then also an astrologer. Astrology was kind of one of his main things. And he talked about spiritual quantum physics. I don't know about this stuff, right? And he had some background in math. One of the things I really liked about his teachings is he believed that things should be simple. And I think this is essential to the natural health philosophy. It's also something that George Osawa, so the founder of macrobiotics, so that was Michio Kushi was Osawa's student. So, and then actually that was what got me going into the health realm and thinking about how the way food plays into everything, and ultimately why I ended up learning Shiatsu or studying Shiatsu. So the quantum ocean is a place where everything it exists beyond time and space. And then Ellis often discussed what he called the law of resonant frequencies. The idea being that when you enter into a practice, you're entering into a frequency signature. But in the quantum ocean, this is existing beyond time and space. So in a way, when you enter into a tradition, you're tapping into the minds that form that tradition, even from the original thinkers and all these great minds, because that exists beyond time and space. The law of resonant frequencies plays into the thought magnetism and and all these kinds of ideas.
Perhaps how these books or teachings might jump out at you,
Right,
or
right.
you
Yeah,
stumble upon these teachers that end up being
yeah,
profound in our lives.
yeah. Yeah, I also began to understand that the law of resonant frequencies plays a big part in herbal traditions, and this is another
Mm.
universal law. If you explore, say, through something called the doctrine of signatures, which is a universal theory. So all traditional herbal systems have utilized this theory, and you can read about it often in the history part of of an herb book, but it's a very living and very real tradition. It's one thing I'm excited about, that it's being more accepted and discussed and talked about in mainstream. So today, I mean, as far as mainstream, I'm saying like the herbal community, people studying herbs and learning, and this is coming in more. But at any rate, the idea is that when this theory is applied to herbalism, which is one of the places you'll see it most, the idea is that a plant has a signature that is indicative of its use. Mm-hmm. If we look at it or observe its habits or taste it, or it could be almost any quality of the plant, anything that we can perceive that's telling us what this relates to. And I've even seen a number of emails that get shared and these things going around the internet where they'll show like the walnut and say, look, the walnut looks like a brain. It's good for the brain. You know, the fig and
carrot like the eye, celery like the bones. Yeah.
Yeah. Typically, people kind of chuckle about that. They say, wow, or they say, isn't this neat? And I've always taught about it. And in some modern theories, the whole thing is reduced to simply being a way for people to memorize. You know, like, oh, dandelion has a yellow flower. It's a diuretic for the urinary system. It's just like we can look at these and come up with tricks to help us study. But I don't believe that that's the real meaning behind it. It's actually the language that people have always been in tune with.
Well, and it seems just so much, because so many people look at that and be like, oh, that's crazy. But it seems so much crazier to not think or expect that if we all came from the same origin, we're all made up of the same compounds. We're all stardust. This is not some spiritual woohoo shit. Right. This is fact and science. And so the fact that we've all evolved side by side, it's only natural that we would have these similarities and that we are in relationship to one another. Right. I mean, I remember when the concept was introduced to me that depending on where you live, what's growing and presenting itself on the land is a reflection of something larger going on. And so like goldenrod, coming about before we get into deep fall and winter where a lot of respiratory illnesses come about, and goldenrod is helpful for that. So just these relationships, they make so much sense to me.
It's common sense. In fact, in the past,
it was
it
right.
was,
It was, and that's interesting, right? This notion that what was common sense gets rewritten based on the beliefs and what we value in the current day and age.
Yeah, which we could go all kinds of directions with that subject.
I'm here for anything,
especially with everything going on today. I'm concerned with mass brainwashing and the ideas of common knowledge being maybe even systematically removed through mass programming. In other words, you can pipe things in, things change. Like we were talking recently about the holidays changing, it's a pagan holiday, it's a Christian holiday, now it's an Amazon holiday.
we were just talking about that, my wife Nava and I, in regards to Purim, the Jewish holiday that was just celebrated. And, we both went to, I went to Sunday school, she went to full-on Hebrew school, but we were taught that it was, this crazy King Haman that, we had a fight to overcome, and then you have these cookies that are shaped like his hat, a triangle, that you celebrate the defeat of him.
Mm.
Well, in actuality, you flip it upside down, and it is representative of the female womb
Mm.
from the pagan holiday of coming
Uh-huh.
of spring.
Uh-huh.
And so it's this time of year where
Uh-huh.
the women would go out and wearing a dress and nothing underneath. They would show their vaginas to the land to
Uh-huh.
invite the slumber of winter into spring. And
Hmm.
so the cookies are a V shape, and a pocket inside is filled traditionally with poppy seeds,
Hmm.
which represent the eggs and female fertility.
Right.
And even if you go back to Egypt, the icon for
Mm-hmm.
fertility and for women is in there as well. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just so interesting how these get co-opted and rewritten. And
Yeah.
I do feel like we're in a time where a lot of this is being reclaimed and brought to the light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a great optimistic viewpoint. I think there's a lot maybe of conflict happening, a lot
Without
of
a
light
doubt.
and a lot of
I mean,
dark.
I experienced this coalescing of the two sides. I mean, it seems so archetypal of this,
Yeah.
I don't want to say good and evil, but I mean, what I when I look underneath it, it feels like service to self or service to others,
Right.
love and fear, or however you want to look at it. But I
Yeah.
believe that this is becoming much more polarized, and these sides do seem to be forming.
Yeah.
I don't know where it leads, but I know which side I'm on.
Right. It seems like what you're talking about and other dynamics as well have been going on a long time, but maybe things are really coming to a head in a certain way right now. Like the polarity is strong right
Yeah,
now.
and there's interesting new ingredients that are introduced, right? I
Yeah.
mean, technology,
Yeah.
this great accelerator, that's
Yeah.
certainly a huge part of it. You then have just the nature of our environmental disasters,
Yeah.
global warming and all of that. I mean, there's this much larger force that's out of balance and trying to come back to homeostasis, just like
Yes.
our bodies do. I
Yeah.
believe that the larger orders of nature do the same.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a transition that's underway.
Yes. Yeah. I I kind of want to bring something up about that. I have a strong fascination in indigenous cultures, particularly Native American, trying to learn about the history of these lands and these things. But
And
also,
did you grow up on Lenape territory?
yeah, this is Lenape land here. Um, and then also exploring Far Eastern studies. And then there's a whole discussion there of how there's so many similar things that come out. And then also looking at other indigenous cultures. One of the ideas that seems very common historically throughout the world that has kind of been erased or labeled as being maybe superstitious or overly simplified or even foolish. But it seems that traditionally people had this basic understanding that when natural disaster happened, when problems happened, that it did have something to do with the way that they were living, either as an individual or collectively. So when people had a poor crop year, they might say, "What did we do wrong?" Not just like, "Oh, it was a bad year in the weather." Well, it's not that simple because the weather's controlled by the spirits, and we are all part of the same system. So we are at whim to the weather, but also it was an understanding that we're in harmony with everything, right? So as part of the whole picture, uh, we can experience the benefits of being in harmony, and I guess there's a belief and a faith that abundance is a natural thing, but So when something goes wrong, you say, what did I do wrong? You know, that's something that should happen with an individual with their health. You know, because you're not a victim of circumstance, or maybe to some degree we are, and we like to think we are. And then when we get sick, we like to feel sorry that we got that way. But why? You know, and then how are we going to change? So obviously, if we can't look at simple things like diet, lifestyle, exercise habits, activity level, you know, what we're doing for work and all these things as affecting our health, and then question how do we change it, but just look for a simple surgical remedy, or and then that's a big challenge with working with herbs, is because the whole system, and myself included, you know, we're all programmed by the same system. So even though we try to get free of it and be creative thinkers, we're still just as brainwashed as everybody, right? Mm-hmm. And then so when we have a problem, we say, oh, you know, poor me, and it's their fault. And then what can you do to get me out of this?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's it. When you're in a victim mindset, you look for a savior, and it's a very dangerous pattern to live through, because it takes on forms in all areas of life. And the flip side of that is, when we actually look at ourselves in relationship to everything else around us on all these different octaves. I mean, our relationship to our family, our relationship to the lineage or culture, our ancestors, the relationship to the state or country we live in, the relationship to the natural world. I mean, it's a much more natural way of looking at it. And like you said, instead of it being a victim of what happened to me, we can then say, okay, I don't even think of it so much as what did I do wrong, as much as where was I out of harmony with my body, with the environment around me, with nature and weather systems, as you spoke about. It seems so weird that it's obvious for us we wouldn't try to plant our crops in the dead of winter. So we can observe it on this larger seasonality. But when it gets into some of the micro or the things that we're not seeing right in front of us, it's not so simple.
You said micro, and I was just thinking microcosm, macrocosm theory. The whole is a reflection of the parts. The part reflects the whole. And I think that the weather, what we're talking about in terms of what's happening on the earth, that's also a reflection of the spiritual mindset. This is a part of Bushido, taking on challenges, acceptance of the situation, right? So rather than the victim mentality, there's the idea that we can rise to the occasion, because a creator put us here, and then there's a lot of sayings to the effect that when when God's getting you ready for something important, He's going to put you through the preparation, mm-hmm. And we should have that mindset to accept challenges. And I think this is a natural mindset. But going back to why I brought that up about the weather, I guess what I'm saying is that the belief system of ancient times, we can say, there's so many things to say and so much variety, but in general, people have come to the understanding that we're part of a whole. And as a way of life, we want to harmonize with that source of life and that connective thread, that thing that everybody shares.
It seems like you have a theme a bunch of Japanese modalities that are in there, not exclusively, of course. There's a lot of Native American and ancient Chinese as well. But even Japanese woodworking you've been into. But that does make me think of, let's just touch quickly on the cabin. Because
sure.
I think that's a great amalgamation of your embodiment.
Yeah, so I'm working right now. I had built a small traditional cabin, and just a little one-room cabin, traditional methods, and then I decided to add a second level. So this is more Japanese style timber frame. And this is just one part of the campsite that I'm developing, which is in a beautiful place in the forest. And we use it for the Herbal Apprenticeship program that I put on, a monthly program. And otherwise, I'm trying to develop it as a place for people to commune with simple, natural things like the fireplace and the cooking outside, and just experiencing the cycle of nature and kind of off-grid living. So we have the outdoor kitchen there, and some camping spots, and hopefully in a little while it'll become more of a center for a variety of things. Right now, I just run my programs there. Sometimes I do the plant walks and the mushroom walks, and then I'm just working on getting it set up.
Yeah, which is how I first met you, on one of the mushroom walks. And,
right. One thing when I start my my weekends, I encourage people to consider the importance of the fire, and then we treat. Coming from, I'm informed by Native American practices and ceremonial ways where the fireplace is given a lot of importance. We're doing an educational weekend, but to me, there's so much knowledge. It's also quantum physics, resonant frequencies idea. The fire is representing the human consciousness and development of knowledge. So right now we have wires, we have lights, but even that is an extension of fire element, because everything boils down to these primary elements. So in a funny way, we're sitting around the fire right now and
telling stories.
Yeah, telling stories. So I like to get people. To me, that's a big part of the education. There's the content of the class time and the experience there, but there's so much teaching, I think, in simple things like learning to take care of a fire, going down to the spring to get that water right from the earth like that.
Well, Nathaniel Whitmore, thank you so much for joining today and sharing your path and experience, and look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of these things, and I'll look forward to exploring this stuff further.
Thanks for joining us this week on Growth Guide. A big thanks to our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by Project New You. I'm a huge fan of their Nitrovite nootropic brain supplement. It's helped me to develop laser focus, a better memory recall, and motivation. Nitrovite has helped me in launching this podcast amongst completing many other projects. Visit growthguide.love/focus to learn more and use promo code GROWTH for 15% off. Make sure to visit our website, growthguide.love, where you can find freebies, exclusive content, and subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. If you found value in listening, I'd really appreciate a rating on iTunes. I can't tell you just how important this is. Or spread the love. Tell your friends, your fam, heck, tell your spirit animals. And follow me on Instagram at growthguide.love. Be sure to tune in next week for our newest episode.